All right, well, welcome everyone. Really great to see you here. I'm Zoe, I'm the Programme Manager at Youth Music. So at Youth Music, I'm responsible for overseeing our grant cycle. So that's looking after everything from grant applications through to assessment, decision making, and then supporting grant holders through the life cycle of their grant. I don't do that all by myself. I lead our team of grants and learning officers, but also a role I play at Youth Music as I'm our early years lead. So I'm going to be co-delivering the session today with Jane Parker, who will introduce herself in a moment. Let's just go on to the next slide. Yeah, so what we're doing today is the first of a series of 3 early years workshops that we've programmed. And the reason we've done this is because we want to profile early years more. It's really important to us at Youth Music. We wanted to respond to requests of grant holders and potential applicants. I think if people can mute, I was getting some feedback from someone there. We wanted to respond to requests from grant holders and applicants for more support about what Youth Music's looking for in early years projects and what we think makes a good early years project. And also, you know, we really love the early years. We want to encourage more people to be engaging with early years and to be getting excited about it. So we've got this session today, then we're going to have another one in January that's going to be focusing in particular on partnership working. And then we've got another one in February about working with sort of a perinatal age group, so with the youngest of the young. So what we're covering today, Jane's going to be giving an overview of her exciting work with the Soundwaves Network. Then the main focus of the session is we're going to be looking at our suggested ingredients for an early years project and sort of unpicking them a bit further. And then finally we're going to end with an overview of some of the key things that Youth Music's looking for in early years project, looking for in the work that we fund. So I'm just going to pass over to Jane to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everybody. I work for Take Art. I'm essentially an early years music practitioner. My favourite place has been on the shop floor with the children making music. I'm very fortunate to be involved in a number of youth music projects over the years, mainly as an early years music practitioner or a music leader. And then more recently with my work with Take Art, not only being an early years music practitioner, but also managing the projects, being a project manager. But I still feel that even if you're a project manager, it's really important, if you can, to actually still be an early years music practitioner delivering. So today, there is a PowerPoint. I promise you it won't be death by PowerPoint. For all those people saying, will I receive a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, you'll get a PDF copy of it afterwards. We will signpost lots of films that we've done in our project. There will be 2 opportunities for you to join a breakout room. You'll be in the same breakout room with the same people twice, and we're going to get you to think about some questions. There will be a Mentimeter. So if you've got a separate device, a phone is the easiest way to do it, then grab your phone and answer some questions on a Mentimeter when we ask you to. If you haven't, doesn't matter. You can answer the questions on a Mentimeter just by using your laptop or your tablet. And there will be time for some questions and answers. Yes, if time. We hope there will be time. And if not, there will be email contacts at the end. So let's see what's next slide. Okay, so this is us. This is our work. We've just finished a 3-year youth music programme, and wow, there's an awful lot of statistics there, isn't there? And the reason that I've bullet pointed all those statistics is because behind these statistics, there's been a lot of careful targeting, a lot of careful partnership development, and a lot of careful key relationship building between all of those people. So you've got your children there involved, and this was across the Southwest, working with 3 music education hubs. We worked with Bristol, we worked with Somerset, and we worked with Plymouth. We're very fortunate we've just received some more youth music funding, which we're about to start this week for the next 3 years, and we're going to now work with 8 music education hubs. We've worked in early years settings, obviously. And I think perhaps what's a little bit different about our work is that all our music leaders work in pairs. And there's a whole reason behind that, as I'm sure you can probably guess why. And we've delivered lots of sessions, as you can see, via beauty of Zoom, in Zoom land over the last 12 months, which has certainly extended our reach. So let's go on to the next page. Okay, there is a whole different workshop that we won't go into today, but fortunately you can actually watch it online. It was delivered back in July. If you click on the link that Zoe's just put in chat, that will take you to a workshop we delivered in July. And that was very much telling you all about our last early years music program. Yes, we had those 5 outcomes that you can see there. And I don't know, Zoe, if it's actually possible to click on the link that you've just put in the chat for you to actually share that second link, Soundwaves Network. Oh, is it going to work? Is the tech going to work? Let's have a look. Oh, yes, it does. Brilliant. Okay. So if we make that page a little bit bigger, are you able to do that, Zoe? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so if we scroll down that page, there we go. Can you stop there a minute? So can you see you've got 3 little headings. You've got summary report, you've got our full report that we wrote for youth music, and in the right-hand column, you've got our resources. So if you click on the right-hand column in resources, that's the one. Brilliant, and we go down that page there. There you go. So now if we stop there, you can click on any of those outcomes. So if, for example, we go in outcome 1, brilliant. And then if we go down that page, can you see that I've put in films and photos, but I've documented exactly why I've put in those films and put in those photos. And so I'm not going to explain what child-centered practice looks like to me today, but hopefully I've explained it in all those films. And there's lots and lots of films there for you to share with your colleagues. And hopefully that will sort of help you with what we did. And that's all I'm going to say on the Soundwaves Network project. So let's go back to the slides.
We're back on the slides now. I'm just checking you can.
Yeah, we can see those slides. Over to you, Zoe.
Perfect. Okay, so the a lovely picture. Sorry, just distracted by photos. So the ingredients for an early years music project. So when myself and Jane were planning this this workshop, this presentation, we started by sort of, listing all the things we thought a project would need, and came up probably with quite a long list, or rather I came up probably with a long rambling list. And then Jane went away and gave it some proper thought and came back and said, well, what we think it really is all about is it's really about the people in your project. So, our key ingredients, or our suggested ingredients for an early years project, are people. So the project lead or the program manager, the music leaders, the people doing the music work, your early years partners, which could be settings and families, perhaps the early years advisory teams, and then other partners, which could be music education hubs, arts organisations, charities, depending on the work you're doing and where you're working. And so, we really think it's about who the people are, what they bring to their project, their approach to the work, and then how they interact with each other. So this really chimes with youth music's approach and what we value and what we want to see in projects and what we value in those projects. So things such as partnership working, communication, collaboration, networking and sharing practice, and then, influencing and making change. It's all about how these groups of people, how these individuals interact with each other. So those are our 4 ingredients. So I guess technically we could just end the workshop here, and guys can go off, and as long as you've got those 4 ingredients, you're sorted. But of course, if those are the ingredients, it's about the qualities of those ingredients, and the qualities of those ingredients is what is going to make the impact, or what is going to make your project work well.
Okay, so this is the first breakout room. We want you to go away and really think about what are the desirable skills, what are the qualities of the first person involved in that project. Oh, hang on, Zoe, we can now see me again on a screen with a little boy playing the guitar. So you might need to go back to that. There we go, we got it back. So we want you to, in your breakout room, we want you to think about what are the desirable skills, what are the desirable qualities of the person who's doing the job that I'm doing at the moment, who's a project lead, not the person on the shop floor. Now that might be the same person, but just focus on the project manager, the person coordinating, the person organizing, the person managing the project, rather than the person delivering the music making activities. Discuss in your group, and then we want you to add those ingredients to a Mentimeter. So, drum roll, when now, hang on, before you go to your breakout room, can you kind of give us a thumbs up on your screen whether you are able to access that Mentimeter and put that code in? So if you go to menti.com on your phone, we'll give you time to do that before we whisk you off to your breakout room. So I'm going to have a type it in on my phone as well. Menti.com. Okay. Right. And then you enter the code, and you can see the code there. 54058332, and you submit that, and then it should ping up on your phone a question, and that you're going to answer that in your breakout rooms. Is anybody struggling with the Mentimeter? If you are, just let us know now. If not, have a lovely time in breakout rooms.
There should be a button now that you can go. A few people were quite quick to join it, so off they went. But
wow.
Yeah, you should all now be able to go to the breakout room.
Ah, that's okay, Sophie. See you in a bit. I think we might just pause that recording for a minute while people go off to their breakout rooms. Milo, God, you're irritating.
Oh. Hi, welcome back. I think a lot of people have got some stuff going on in the background. Naughty children. Or dogs, who knows what, but welcome back again.
Okay, Phoebe, are we all back?
Yes, we
Brilliant.
should be.
Well, that's always a good thing that people come back. That's nice. Okay, so Zoe, we've got this lovely scrolling screen that we can see everybody's answers. Was there anything in particular there, Zoe, that you saw and thought, yeah, there's lots of great stuff?
Yeah, I think maybe the administrator in me, you know, some of the things, yeah, maybe the things we don't enjoy doing so much, but, you know, are just really practical things, the things about budgeting and also about fundraising and bid writing. And we had a little bit of a chat in this room about it's also, you know, even if that's maybe not your forte, you still sort of need to be aware of it and know where to get that support from. Yeah, those are the ones that stood out for me, but loads of great stuff.
And the one that stood out to me that I explained to Zoe that I'm not very good at is budgeting. So I delegate that to somebody else. So those are not my skills. Budgeting is not my skills. It's really good that I I try and have a real good understanding of the budgets, but that's not my key skill. So my key skill is, my background is, yes, delegating is a skill. It is, Sophie. Yes, thank you. So, but budgeting isn't my best skill. I have always explained to Take Art that if I was in charge of their budgets, it would be well and truly in liquidation by now. So it's good that I'm not. Okay, so should we go to the next screen, Zoe? While we're doing that, does anybody want to unmute and share anything that they talked about in their breakout room? You're very welcome to. If not, I'll carry on. But if you do, just unmute now. That's fine. I'm really happy to embrace the silence in Zoom land. I'm good with that. Okay, so if we go back to the slides on the PowerPoint presentation. Ooh, that's an interesting view we've got there, Zoe. Ah, there you all are.
It's nice to see everyone. Hello.
Yeah, it is nice to see everybody. There we go. Brilliant. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay. Well, I think you've pretty much done the job for me. This is what I came up with. You said most of these things: a funding application writer, an interim report writer, a final report writer, and any other articles and blogs you have to write. Yes, most of you mentioned the fact that you do need excellent knowledge of early childhood music education. I think as a project manager, you need to know what good early childhood music practice looks like. Because when you're going to recruit people, how do you know who you're going to recruit if you don't actually know what an early childhood practice looks like? For me, I have to say, I think, you know, if you can actually have experience yourself as working on that shop floor, then that's all the better. Even in the last project, I was one of the people still working. I was one of the people paired up. I think it's really important. I think you need to be a speaker. You need to be a presenter. You're a trainer, you're a mentor, you're a counsellor, aren't you, as a project manager? In my case, I think I'm constantly need to be reflective, and I need a critical friend, and I do have a critical friend, and I do have a mentor. So as a project manager, who's your mentor? Who's your critical friend? Who do you go to? You certainly need an understanding and appreciation of the worlds of your partners. Of course, you can understand about the life of a freelancer. How are you going to communicate with your freelancers? What's the best way? Overwhelm them with emails or put them in a WhatsApp group? How are you going to communicate with your busy music education hub leads? How are you going to communicate with your early years setting managers? Yes, I think you do need to be a recruitment specialist. You've obviously got all those project manager skills you've talked about. I think you need to be personable. You need to be able to speak to a range of partners. One minute, your partner might be an 18-year-old young person. The next minute, your partner might be an academic who is got their PhD and is, you know, writing all sorts of articles for you. And I think you need to be hugely flexible, because you might need to change your program timeline. You might need to alter your budget. You might need to prioritize. Does anybody want to comment on any of those, or what you said, or anything else that I've missed out? Because I'm sure I've missed out lots. So just unmute yourself or add any comments now.
I just totally echo that, Jane. I mean, we've been doing a music project for a little while, and yeah, the wealth of partners is unbelievable. You know, working with music hubs, working with practitioners, and I think it's always just thinking, isn't it, and reminding yourself at all times, you know, where those people are at and how you can meet them, and how they meet you as well, because they want to meet you and find out about you, don't they, as well? So it is a true partnership, and I mean, it's just such a privilege, I find. You know, working with all these different people, and so just really to echo that. So
you're right, it is an absolute privilege. I think not to forget that those of us that are in this position, it is an absolute honor and privilege to do this work. It really is. Yeah. But yeah, I think ability to speak to a range of partners and to be personal is hugely important. Anybody else want to comment or say anything from their own experiences? Okay, let's move on. Next slide. So, I cannot stress to give yourself time as a project manager. We all know the practicalities of setting up a project, can't we? But I cannot stress spending careful time finding your partners, connecting with your partners, collaborating with your partners, and listening to their needs will take time if you really want to get that desired impact. For me, I am just about to start this new youth music project. And the first thing I've got to do in the next 2 weeks is to connect with all 8 Music Education Hub leads individually and listen to their desires and what they want. Listen, then have interviews with all the early years settings. We've got 14 of them. Listen to the music leaders. That takes time. It really does. Don't rush these things. Give time. Zoe, did you want to talk about recruiting music leaders?
Yes. Yeah, so obviously, as we've been discussing, the people in your project, and particularly your music leaders, the people who are going to be delivering the work for you, are really key. And so, so before you start recruiting or picking who those music leaders are, is to really think about who those people need to be for the work you're planning to do, the community or the setting you're working with, and what you're planning to achieve for your project, and more broadly through the work of your organisation. And particularly, so I would strongly encourage people to take the time to also maybe think a bit outside the box, and to be thinking about what are the skills and experience that are most important to have in the project, and who could offer that. So, for example, do you need someone who really understands the community you're working in and is trusted by them? Or has your organisation identified a need that you need to work with more male music leaders? Or are you working on a project with disabled early years children? So would a disabled music leader be a good role model for them? Or are you in an area that lacks that pipeline of new music leader talent? So where are the next music leaders coming from? Do you need to nurture some young people, some sort of 18 to 25-year-olds? And so then I think it's really thinking about which skills need to go at the top of the list. Is that lived experience and specialist knowledge, rather than maybe someone who has delivered lots of those kind of projects before, but lacks that lived experience? Is that specialist and lived experience the most important thing? Would the value, the knowledge and the skills that they bring and the potential impact they have be worth investing in? So then it's thinking about how your job ad and your job description's put together. So can the people you want to recruit see themselves in the role? Maybe they don't see themselves as early years music leaders, and maybe you need to describe things in a different way. So be upfront. We want to recruit someone with knowledge of, or experience in, or who understands this community, or has a background in, knows how to do whatever, and explain how you might support them to develop the other skills that they need. Then, and then it's thinking about who you recruit through. So using, your partners and your organizations that are already connected with those people to help you recruit. And so, of course, that all links back to time. So, taking time to do that, and then taking time to invest in your music leaders, especially if you're maybe bringing in people who've maybe had less experience in the work that you're doing, but have got that specialist knowledge and experience that's really going to make the project. Also, we appreciate, with the time thing, youth music's pragmatic about these things. We know it takes time to nurture a workforce. So, so maybe there's that kind of thing where you're bringing on your sort of experienced music leaders that you've worked with before, but taking some time to help, to nurture some new people as well. So in a little while, I'll talk a bit particularly about equality, diversity and inclusion. And I think the start of your project, particularly when you're recruiting and you're thinking about who's on your team, that's when those two things come together. But yeah, time, definitely.
Great. Okay, let's see the next slide. Right, so time to go back in those breakout rooms again. Time to access that Mentimeter again, but a little bit different this time. Talking the word time. Thinking about music leader, I've put music leader like that because, yeah, that's the first thing we need to discuss. Music leader. What does that say? Okay, so just have a think about that. What are the desirable skills or qualities? We've got a number of music leaders here today. We operate in the real world, guys. There is no such thing as the ideal best music leader. It will always, always be a compromise. So you may not agree in your breakout room the rank order of your qualities, but can you discuss in your room and add your top 3 ingredients to our Mentimeter? Okay, off you go.
One of us, I can't think. Recording in progress. One of us said engaging, and then we started to unpack what engaging was,
Yeah,
which took us down, you know, a whole route of qualities there. What is, you know, oh, you're so engaging. What does that mean? Well, it means a million things, doesn't it? It means watching and listening and leaving those gaps and that eye contact and the ability to respond and so in a way, if you put engaging as one of your top 3, you know, I did try and unpack that in my little in my offering there, because I think it's a $1 million question or answer, if you like.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Penny. Anybody else want to comment? Go for it, Carolyn.
Yeah, we were talking in our group about how the leader needs to be adaptable and flexible. But as part of this, they need to be able to reflect on their own practice and at various points use that to complete the sort of the cycle to feed back into what you do in future work, adapting and changing if need be to be able to improve outcomes or, you know, achieve specific targets.
Yeah, and as a project manager, when do you give people time, paid time, to reflect? Because don't expect them to reflect when they're not, you know, it's really tricky, isn't it? And at the start of a project, are you going to build in time for them to be in a studio and work playfully? Or do something, some sort of, if you're, in my case, I pair up 2 music leaders, I need to build in time for them to plan before they even go to the early years setting. And I need to say to them when they get to the early years setting, don't do anything. For the first session, just step back and observe. And the first session is a half a day, 3.5 hours. Do nothing, but document away, observe, and see what the children are doing creatively, musically themselves before you pile in with your ideas. And that is a skill, because you don't want your music leaders to parachute in to a children's centre, a library, an early years setting, because you don't really want them to be viewed as a specialist, do you? Or do you? Perhaps there's a whole debate around there. What is their role? But for me, pay them to reflect. Buy them lunch when they finish their 3.5 hours. Take them for lunch somewhere. Treat them nicely. Go and see them. Go and visit them in their work. It's really important that you value them. And also, when you're there and you're setting up the project, establish that they are researchers. Use that word, researchers. Establish that your early years practitioners who they're working with are researchers as well. Because actually this is a whole action research project, isn't it? You're learning, aren't you? And when you say to them, structure in those 3.5 hours when they're going for half a day, they're going to need a bit of help in how to structure. What do we do? How much time do we spend documenting? How much time do we spend doing this activity? How much time do we spend together with the early years practitioners and us? And my answer is a minimum at the end of the day for 30 minutes, a minimum. And when you go into that early years setting, spend time touching base with that staff. So all those skills as an early years music practitioner, as a music leader, there's lots and lots of skills there, isn't it? Does anybody want to comment on that and what that looks like actually on the ground, or anybody's experiences of having time to reflect, having time to plan? Anybody want to comment? Go for it, Charlie.
I was doing the Spitalfields Musical Rumpus project, and I'd never done a project like that, as it was one of the first things I'd done as a musician and working in early years. And at the end of each project, the person running it just booked us for a coffee and had a good hour, had a list of questions and an audio recording about what worked about the project, what didn't, and I just couldn't believe it. I thought, this is amazing. And any sort of musical project I've done since, I've always tried to encourage people to do that, because when I did the next project after that, I knew that I'd been listened to. And it just, yeah, as a freelancer, I don't often feel that way. You know, as a musician, you don't often get that. And it was really valuable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So most of you are working in the freelance world, and you're working in isolation, aren't you? And to have that connection, to feel valued, to be treated nicely. It's a simple thing, but it goes a long, long way, doesn't it? And if you want your music practitioners to go to a learning seminar, pay them, build it all into your project. Don't expect them to do it just off their own, you know, treat them nicely. Anybody else want to add anything about being treated nicely as a music leader, or feeling valued, or their role as a music leader? Shout now. Okay. All right. So let's go back to what were my answers, Zoe. Let's have a look back on the board and see what I put down. But I think your answers are much better than mine. I came up with mine about a week ago. So let's see what I said. Okay. Sorry, Zoe and Phoebe, but I do question music leader. I worry that if you go into an early years setting, or if you go into any kind of setting and you say, I'm the music leader, what does that say? Zoe, do you want to comment on that, or Phoebe?
I know, I completely get where you're going from, and I think it's something that is brought up with youth music, and I guess we use it as a term, as maybe a bit of a compromise, that sometimes we do need to know who we're talking about. But there's I think, you know, there's probably all challenges around, you know, do you say music facilitator? Do you say teacher? That's
absolutely. So it is a bit like, what do you call yourselves? You know, I'm an early years music practitioner. Other people are music teachers. I think a name is an interesting one, isn't it? What do you call yourself? But I think what you call yourself, you know, I'm a practitioner, because the reason I call myself that is because early years people are early years practitioners, and I want to be viewed on an equal platform to them. And that's really important to me. Yes, of course, as an early years practitioner, I need knowledge and skills of child-centered practice, but I need a willingness to take risks. Because I don't know what's going to happen when I walk into that early years setting. I can plan to the hilt, and I know how to plan. I know as a teacher about my outcomes, my objectives, my plenary. I know what a good lesson plan looks like with my risk assessment, everything there. But that can all go out the window, as we all know. And it's almost saying to yourself, how much of a risk are you going to take? And to be it's almost you're almost exposing yourself when you go in, being so playful. It's risky, isn't it? It's risky going in with following the children. It's risky, but you know, you're being watched by other people as well, isn't it? I think a willingness to learn, to attend those CPD sessions, to attend those learning seminars, and to learn from the early years practitioners that you're working with, not only for your music leaders to have knowledge of the EYFS, but also their understanding of what music in the early years is. And for those early years practitioners, do you, when you work with your librarians, do you say to them, what does music mean to you? Now, what's Sophie got in here? Sophie says, I find it useful to think in terms of preparation rather than planning. Yes. Yeah, I like that, Sophie. Thank you. But find out from your music, from your early years practitioners, your librarians, whoever it is you're working with, what does music mean to them? Have that discussion. What does music mean to your families? And what music is meaningful to your families? We all know that the wonderful work that Nicola's done with tuning in, you know, thinking about recorded music. Play the recorded music that's meaningful to those families. Play the recorded music that's meaningful to those early years practitioners. Now, I think it's important that you're a skilled musician. And I'm just going to stop that there and say that, okay? At the end of the day, I think it's okay to play your instrument. Why shouldn't you take your violin and play it in an early years setting? Why not? I think it's really important. You're a skilled musician. You know, if you can harmonize your voice with someone singing spontaneously, improvising, do it. I think it's beautiful. I think all your music leaders should be viewed as researchers, and you should use that term. And, you know, really important. As soon as you see yourself as a researcher, you know, you're giving value to your music leader there, because they will be documenting things for you. They will be documenting things for your evaluator. I think a good music leader needs to be a trainer. And in being a trainer, you need to be pretty sensitive, don't you, to manage your crowd of people, particularly if you've got some low confident early years practitioners amongst your crowd. I think a good music leader needs to be a collaborator. In our case, we insist that they work together in pairs. They plan together or prepare. I much prefer that, Sophie. I'm going to nick that. Thank you. They deliver and they reflect together. Yes. Thank you. Researcher. It's a great way to think about it. You're all researchers, all of you. We're all researchers here. And to know why your music leader does what they do. Do they really know the musical skills behind why they're teaching that rhyme, that song, that activity? Because they really need to know why. Just to say it's fun doesn't really cut the mustard, does it? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Anybody got any comments on what I've just said? Just unmute yourselves now. I'll wait for a few seconds and embrace that Zoom silence. Anybody wants to say anything on what I've said or anything that chimes with you, say now. Or it doesn't chime with you. Okay. So lastly, the ingredients of a setting. And when I'm in a setting, it could be a library. You know, you work with all different types of settings. It could be a school, it could be a breastfeeding clinic, whatever your setting is, wherever you're going to do your music project. In this case, this particular setting, this photo was taken before lockdown. I was working with this setting. That person there is the nursery teacher, working with 3-year-olds. And there she is mirroring the child's musical offerings. So you've got your setting, you've decided you're going to work with, you know, whatever it is, St. Peter's Nursery School. How are you going to create that effective partnership with your setting that is going to gain the biggest impact? What does an effective partnership look like with your setting? And in this case, we just want you to write in the chat. So away you go with your ideas. Oh no, hang on, you're not going to go with your ideas. You're going to look at my ideas. Oh, this is even easier. So I'm going to give you my ideas and you've got to rank order them. Right, let's see what my ideas are. Is your top priority 1, I'm going to go for a setting with an effective, respected gatekeeper who will shout about my project amongst their early years community. So the type of person that you've chosen your nursery and they've really got a terrier as a head teacher, a terrier as a manager, a terrier as an early years person, and they are going to shout about it. They're going to tell all their other early years settings about it. Is that the most important thing for you? And they're hugely respected. Is the most important thing for you, number 2, a setting who has chosen a creative champion. So they've chosen that Barbara, their early years practitioner, is going to be their creative champion. She's going to work with you. She's going to work with your music leader as an equal. And she, Barbara, will share her learning together afterwards at a network event with you. Okay, so you've got someone on the shop floor there. Is that the most important thing for you? Or is the most important thing for you a setting that understands your expectations regarding the aim of your youth music project? This is action research. It's not about an end product, but it's about noticing, responding appropriately to the children's musicality. Okay, in the chat, can you rank order them? And if you can't rank order them, just say it in the chat. Can't, all important, or, oh, thank you, that was quick. Or is it, oh, okay, all right, you will rank order them, I can see your answers. Now you're all just copying each other now, stop it. That's enough. Okay, you do realise that if you're all saying the same, you've got to explain why you're saying the same. Dusty bin. 3, 2, 1. Can you still do that, Sophie? That 3, 2, 1 with the old fingers. 3, 2, 1. Okay, you guys that have said 3, 2, 1. One of you's got to be brave and unmute yourselves and say why. There is no right answer, by the way. So come on, someone who said something, unmute yourselves, be brave and say why you said your answer.
I think I said 3 as the top one because I noticed that 3 was the only one who mentioned about the child. And at the end of the day, the children are the focal point for us for the project, and it's their learning that is the most important thing over everything else.
Yeah. Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you. Okay. Can anybody else be brave and unmute yourselves and say why you chose what you said?
Hi.
Go for it, Charlie.
I think that number 3 just seems to be like the most long-term way to change something, and it's going to be in a like if you work in a setting and they understand that it's not about the end product, but I don't know, that just one seems to feel like it would have a longer lasting change to it rather than the other 2.
Yeah.
And similar with the second one, those kind of things are going to be longer lasting, and the kind of principles of what you're trying to do, would kind of sit deeper maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the understanding of the expectations as well, actually what we do, because I think certainly for myself, sometimes as project leader, the project so well in your head, you've got the bid, you've got the outcomes, it so well. But actually, is that communicated to the practitioners? Because I think that can make a really big difference, can't it? Obviously, them knowing, what's going on here, what are we aiming for by the end of this, and seeing the whole thing in context a bit more. So I think that number 3 really spoke of that a little bit more, actually. Everyone sort of being on the same page a bit more and understanding, working as in partnership, which leads to that idea of number 2 of your music leaders as equals. That leapt out to me. If I had a highlighter, I would have highlighted a bit. And I think respected gate, that's great. That's really good, but it's not, that would come down on there really, just because obviously active is good. But yeah, you hope that with work with different partners, it would almost happen organically, that people would start to learn about the project, you would hope, from parents perhaps learning about it, etc. So that was my reason.
No, thank you, Fiona. I can see that 2 people have raised their hands. If you've got your hands raised, just unmute yourself.
Sorry, I should have raised my hand.
No, you're okay, Fiona. No, I don't raise my hand either. So I love this Zoom. Go for it, Carolyn.
I was going to say that 3, 2, 1 is definitely my order, but I don't think we should underestimate the power of someone who is that respective gatekeeper in number 1. So if you're trying to do a project that you want to continue in the future, if you want to spread the good word about the benefits of what you have done through number 3 and number 2, if you've got an amazing nursery leader or head teacher in that position who can share the message maybe further than you can through their own personal contacts, then the benefits of that shouldn't necessarily be underestimated.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Sophie.
I was just going to add about number 2 and a setting who's chosen a creative champion, and just kind of being a bit wary about settings, about whether early years practitioners have agency themselves in whether they are choosing to be the creative champion or whether the management team have chosen them as the creative champion, and how much of a sort of difference that can kind of have in a project if a nursery practitioner that you're working with really wants to take part in something, and also in terms of sort of thinking about participants in a project. If I'm working with a nursery setting, then in lots of ways the practitioners are also my participants in that project. So I need to care for their needs as well as the children's needs.
Absolutely.
So they quite often sort of go hand in hand, I think.
I think they do. I think that's a really valued point about a creative champion. Have they chosen themselves or have they been put forward? Okay, I think we might have some more raised hands up. If you've got your hand, just unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, anybody else want to add anything or anything I've missed?
Can I just chip in? I think that everything that everybody has said so far is absolutely right. But the thing about that's number 2, one of the things for me is what the sort of the longevity of a project is, and kind of going in and doing a project is really great, but unless you set up stuff with staff and other practitioners so that they can kind of continue that work, then in some ways what's the point of it? So the creative champion thing, maybe, I don't know, that's not quite the right word, but that thing about working alongside staff to develop their confidence, I suppose, and understanding of continuing what you do would be quite important for me, I think.
Absolutely and possibly best not to just work with one person, a creative champion, because if they go, then they've taken it all, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So so making sure, but and it not necessarily, that might not even necessarily be staff. It could be parents. It could be a whole different group of people, but something that would enable that work to keep going even once the music leader has dipped out of the project or whatever happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Becky. Anybody else want to add anything? Or anything we've missed off there that you think something else you've come up with, you wouldn't have thought, you came up with something completely different that is equally valued. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I'm going to mute myself now. Okay, Zoe, this is over to you.
Yeah, great. So not a huge amount of time, but obviously everything that we've been talking about today and everything you said are the things that youth music's looking for. But I'm going to get a little bit more focused and a little bit more of the funder coming through now. So I'm going to talk through some of the key things, and it's going to build on what's discussed today. So, the people, their qualities and the partnerships, so how those people are working together is all really central. And before I start, I think some of you might know that we're currently reviewing our grants programs at Youth Music and launching some refreshed programs next year. But please don't worry, everything that we talk about today is still relevant, still front and centre, probably even more front and centre. The changes we're making are more about, fingers crossed, making the application process more light touch and accessible, not changing what we fund. So don't think I'm going to give you loads of information now and then it's all vanishing after next year. So a youth Years at Youth Music is really important to us. It's one of our 6 priority areas, and in fact in the last sort of financial year 2021, on our funded projects, 27% of core participants were in that 0 to 5 age group, which is actually the biggest category, and we gave out over £1 million to early years specific projects. And so we have this early years priority area, and this is a description of that priority area and what we're looking to fund in it. And so the really key things to note is that youth music's about focusing on children who face barriers to accessing music making because of their circumstances or where they live. So we are looking to fund projects that are working with those children and breaking those barriers down. Now, we know that early years projects often it often takes in universal or open access settings, and for very good reasons, so that's fine, but we're still looking for that kind of focus on how you're enabling those facing barriers to participate. And then we're looking for stuff that we fund to be working in one or more of these areas, so either providing access to quality music education, music making, or supporting the adults around that child to network and collaborate, again, those people all coming together, and or looking at workforce diversity, so which we know is a sort of a challenge across the whole sector, not just early years at the moment. So recently at Youth Music, we've been doing a lot of reflection around the early years work we fund. We've reflected on our sort of 20 years plus of funding work, what's had impact, what's had longevity. We've done lots of consultation with grant holders and other stakeholders. And given that we have a limited amount of funding, even if we spent all the funding we had each year, which is about £10 million now, and even if we spent that all on early years, we wouldn't be able to reach every early years child, nowhere near. So where are we best to invest our funding? And if we have that limited money, and given the current challenges facing the sector, where are we best to put stuff? So here are some sort of key things that have come through that reflection and the discussions with the stakeholders about what sort of projects and programs we should be funding. And I think it will chime with a lot of stuff we've already been talking about. So projects that build on existing work and research, so projects that sort of thinking about what's gone before, not reinventing the wheel. And possibly with an action research focus. That's not necessarily for everything, but there should be space in our funding for that, where projects are trying out, testing and learning, doing that reflection. And as we said before, having that understanding of child development, early years pedagogy, so as well as that musical skills and understanding. And if the music leaders and the music organisations don't have that themselves, who are they partnering with to bring that into the project? And then really important to youth music is projects should be listening to and valuing early years children's voices. So when youth music talks about youth voice, we mean everyone from 0 to 25-year-olds. And then structuring their work around what they learn from those children. Projects should be reflective. So we've talked a lot about that. So constantly evaluating what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's working, how do you know, and making changes where needed. And there was sort of a strong thing that came through a lot in talking to people, that if projects are child-centred, child-led and reflective, that's when you sort of see qualities driven up, or you end up with good quality programs. And then, of course, the earliest projects that seem to be the most impactful understand that it's not just about delivering that high quality work directly with the earliest children, but for sort of maximum impact or success, it's considering and involving the adults that are around the child. So that might be carers or families, early years practitioners, teachers, because they've got the ability to change and create the environment around the child and carry the work on when you're not there. Connecting and sharing with others is really important for the project, for people to learn, but also for the sector as a whole, bringing people together, creating a unified voice. And there's also opportunities for that kind of opportunities to influence and spread the practice. Then I put acronyms in, so apologies. So workforce development and continuing professional development. So training being really important, but people reflecting back at us that when it's being strategic, so thinking less about maybe one-off events, but more, one-off events can be strategic, but thinking about stuff that's going to allow you to influence, support people to carry on the work, and you know, have a bigger impact. So thinking about how you're going to use that training to have a wider influence. Then quality, diversity and inclusion, that's a really core value at Youth Music. I'll talk more about it in a minute. And organisations that are actively committed to improving equality, diversity and inclusion, we believe at Youth Music that makes the work better. And then there was, you know, sort of general agreement that we should be funding more strategic projects. So that is projects that don't just focus on delivery, but are looking to influence and make change beyond that direct delivery. Of course, we're still going to continue to fund direct delivery, but you know, when there's limited money to spend, what should we be funding to make sure things can ripple out? And then finally, I think, you know, when we've been talking about partnerships and the people, it's that, you know, projects that are not parachuting in, they're collaborating it with and valuing settings, parents, everyone else involved, and have that focus on legacy. So what happens when the music leaders go, which I think would make a great title of a memoir for someone. Yeah, so obviously that's quite a heavy, that's quite a big list there. You know, there's some key themes coming out: collaboration, partnership, reflection, child-centered, thinking beyond just the delivery. We're not expecting every project, every grant application to Youth Music to address all those things. I'd say if you were coming in for a large grant, what we should call our Fund Bs, then we probably would expect you to be addressing quite a few of them and to have considered all of those things. If you're coming in for a smaller grant, what we call Fund A, definitely not thinking that you'd be able to achieve all of those things, but we can encourage organisations to look down that list, think where they're at with them, and then be thinking, if you're coming in for a Youth Music grant, what thing do you want to focus on? What thing could the grant help you achieve? However, there are two things on that list that we would like, you know, I think every Youth Music project and grant application should be looking at, and that is youth voice, or for this age group, you might want to think about child voice or baby voice, or child-centered practice. And then the other one is equality, diversity and inclusion. So because they're both really key values to Youth Music. So youth voice, Youth Music is important in any project we fund. So and in terms of applications, we're looking for two things. So we're looking for project design that's been led with consultation with early years children, so you've co-designed with them. And then for project delivery, we're looking for child-centered practice, so that children's voices continue to be heard and allowed to influence delivery. So there's two things up there. So the Youth Music, we'll send around all the links. There's a Youth Music Quality Framework. There's an early years version, which is useful to look at to understand our approach to that. And then Musical Development Matters, that's not, wasn't created by Youth Music, but it really aligns with our approach. So if you sort of want to understand a bit more about what Youth Music means about these things, then they're the things to look at. Worth mentioning that we do, of course, support workforce development projects and training projects where you're focused on the workforce rather than the early years children, in which case you should absolutely be co-designing and consulting with the early years workforce, whether that's your music practitioners, early years practitioners, your music education hubs. But I would still encourage you to think about how children's voices are going to come through in your work, as they are ultimately going to be the beneficiaries of that training programme. So what would sort of robust youth voice look like for an early years project, or what would I be looking at in an application? So there'd be three things that I'd be looking at. So have they attempted, the person who's written the application, to understand early years children's viewpoints and needs? Have they involved children in co-design? And are there opportunities for children to continue to influence the project? And some of the ways that could be demonstrated in an application, if you're working with older early years children, 4 or 5-year-olds, maybe even toddlers, you might have consulted directly with them. You might be having discussions or getting creative responses from them, asking them what they like doing, what they enjoy. Have you spoken to the parents, the carers, the adults who know those children well? What do they like doing? What do they need? What do those adults need as parent or a carer or an early years practitioner? Have you reflected on past delivery and projects? What worked, what didn't? What did your evaluation tell you? In particular, thinking about how children responded. And have you building in a child-centered approach to delivery where you're responding to children as part of project delivery? That might be in the moment, you know, so responding to a child's music making, or it might be more long-term about how you're developing and changing the project over time. So obviously looking for observation and reflection being built in, and opportunities for those other adults to reflect and feed in as well. Sorry. And then really importantly, have they considered another thing is what music making children are already doing? So their existing musical identities and lives. What are their musical lives or environments like at home? We're going to find, you know, there's very few children who won't experience any music, you know, but it just might not be people might not identify it as music making or music or doing music. And then finally, looking for projects that give children opportunities to explore, to create, to play, to make choices. Yeah, so, and kind of generally projects where we find haven't really embraced that youth voice, that child-led practice. We sort of, in applications, we tend to see things like, they're few and far between, but sometimes there's just no consultation and it's almost put across because they're early years children. We can't talk to them like that, or it's very simplistic consultation that's just about what the children like doing, you know, like they like the drumming or they always pick up the rattles. That's all really important stuff, but we just want to push people to go a bit further. Haven't spoken to the adults that might know the child's needs. Haven't particularly often people haven't acknowledged or thought about the children's existing musical identities or lives, sort of maybe almost thinking the children don't have anything, they don't have any prior knowledge or experience. And then finally, often seeing that delivery is very top down. So no opportunity for observation or reflection, or maybe it's a very set curriculum that doesn't give opportunities to respond to the children. There may well be places, and there's arguments for, you know, set curriculums that work very well, or set programs, activities, but that's not the work that Youth Music's here to fund. And then the second thing, equality, diversity and inclusion, and this does go hand in hand with youth voice and with that child-led practice, and this is a really key youth music value. It's really grown in importance for us for the last couple of years. It's currently a really important part if you're applying for a large grant of Fund B application, and it's going to start to come much more central to Fund A, so our small grant applications as well. And we're looking, yes, we want to fund diverse organisations and a diverse range of organisations, and we want to fund those doing good work in this area. But most importantly, we want to fund organisations who are committed to making change in this area. And sort of here's what we sort of mean by equality, diversity and inclusion. It's about your situation, your community, what diversity looks like for your organisation. It's about looking at a whole different range of characteristics. So I think people often get hooked on the ethnic diversity and cultural diversity stuff, which is really important. You definitely should be looking at it. But there's a whole other range of things: socioeconomic, gender, musical background, educational background, disability. Data driven, so you know you need to be reflected on what's the actual current situation and what do you need to change. So being honest with yourself. Again, that kind of, there's a lot of debate in early years at the moment about songs and repertoire. That's really important, but we're looking to push people further. And then the sort of the key thing, and I realise we're just running out of time, so I'll be finished in a moment, is equality, diversity, inclusion is really about a redistribution of power. So whose voices are heard, who's represented, who gets to influence and who gets to make decisions. So if you're doing youth voice, child-led centred practice, you're doing co-design with children, with adults, that's a really central part of equality, diversity and inclusion. And then obviously just to end, it's a really ongoing journey. You're not going to be able to, it probably will never end. You're not going to, we also understand organisations of different places on their journey, and you won't, you know, be able to do everything at once. So you might be focused on one particular thing. And Youth Music understands that. We're on that journey as well, but we are looking for organisations who are committed to change. So just like a 10-second summary, if you're planning a project and you want to go for youth music funding, it's making sure you've got a focus on early years children facing barriers and you're supporting them to break down those barriers, that you're doing one of the following: you're providing access to quality music making or and or supporting the adults around the child to share and collaborate, or increasing the diversity of the early years music workforce, or doing all of those. Must have co-design with participants, so early years children and those adults. Must have child-centred and reflective practice, and must be delivered by an organisation who's committed to improving quality, diversity and inclusion. And then very aware, always as a funder, I always like to give a little bit of a health warning, particularly, you know, when we're talking to lots of people, encouraging them to come into applications at Youth Music. Obviously our funding is competitive. We only have money to fund about 40% of applications. That's lower in some really competitive regions, especially London and the Southwest. We always get huge numbers of applications from both those regions. So even applications that do all of these things and are really smashing it and absolutely things Youth Music wants to fund might not be successful. And that's the sort of, you know, how competitive things are at the moment. So yeah, so that's my kind of spiel for that bit. There's a couple of things. Our Fund Day grants are open for applications up now. You can go and have a look at that. Contact me if you want questions. 2022 if you have questions. 2022 application deadlines announced hopefully before Christmas. As I said, we're refining the application process and our decision-making processes, but everything we've said today is really important. It's going to be front and centre of those. And my email address is there, and you are very welcome to contact me to talk about if you're thinking about making an application, started an application, not sure if you want to make an application, or you just want to come and tell me about the work you're doing. I really love to chat, and I really love to chat about early years. Unfortunately at Youth Music they make me think about older children and young people as well, but early years is the thing I really love. Yeah, I think we've gone a bit over time there. So how are you feeling, Jane? Do you want to give me questions or something?
I've done really well, only 3 minutes over time. So if anybody wants to stay for 5 minutes and just ask myself or Zoe any questions, then please do. We'll stop sharing our screen. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, any questions, my email's in the chat, and Zoe's email's there. And thank you for coming.